So Nikon and Atomos have just announced that they've kind of got this partnership. Atomos have basically worked with them to get raw HDMI signal from the Nikon Z6 to their new Atomos Ninja V recorder. Now, this is an incredible feat. It's the first time ever that a mirrorless camera has had a raw output and a raw output over HDMI. This news really excited me. When I read it and kind of saw the interviews, I was so amazed by the possibilities this Nikon Z6 could have, especially when you compare the fact that the next best commercially available full-frame camera that offers 12-bit RAW 4K is either a Canon C700 or a Red Monstro VV. And last year I purchased the Panasonic GH5S, which is what I personally believe to be one of the best mirrorless video cameras you can buy today for around £2,000. I've used this camera over the last year and have shot so much content on it. It's a very competent camera which delivers incredibly high quality images. It definitely has its flaws, but it's a camera I love to pick up and use. And there's a big reason why I bought this camera. It's because it's small and allows me to capture much more dynamic shots. And the reason I'm mentioning that is because the Nikon Z6 is exactly the same in terms of its form factor. It's the same price as the GH5S, with the added benefit of having a full frame sensor. In terms of internal recording codecs, the GH5S is actually better, but with this new partnership with Atomos, the Z6 just transforms into kind of a league of its own. No other camera manufacturer has offered so much in terms of raw quality to the Nikon Z6 and Atomos Ninja V combined. From what Atomos has said at NAB, the Nikon Z6 is filming 12-bit 4K 30p at the moment. And based upon some of the other clips I saw them playing, it looks like they were also shooting some shots at 60p. Whether it was 4K 12-bit or 1080p 12-bit is currently unknown. What we do know though is the sensor is capable of filming and outputting 120 frames per second over HDMI. So I wouldn't be surprised if they were also trying to get 120 frames per second 12-bit RAW. Now Atomos are also saying that they're doing recording beyond the 4K resolution. And we know the sensor has more than enough pixels to do around 6.5K. Now I doubt it will be that high, but even a 4.5K output would be incredible for reframing purposes, allowing you to keep a 4K deliverable. So we know at the moment that they're definitely pushing 12 bits. And Atomos is saying there's even potential to go further. They actually don't know how far they can kind of go with this technology at the moment. But based upon what Atomos is saying, it looks like the sensor and what they can get out of it is pretty much unrestricted by the hardware of the Z6 and also the Ninja V. So it could be that in a couple of months' time, we're actually seeing that they're using 14 bits of color in RAW over HDMI to the Ninja V. The other great thing is the fact that they're recording to ProRes RAW, and that's Apple's new kind of RAW container based upon their kind of ProRes families. But it's a whole new developed codec, and it aims to bring RAW recording kind of data sizes down by up to 6 times. And what this basically means is if you're using a fairly high-end Mac with a decent AMD graphics card, you're going to be able to play 4K RAW files back completely smoothly without having to generate kind of proxies or do anything like that. It just makes the whole experience much more easier. A small problem with the Nikon Z6 and Z7 is that you're meant to use the new Nikon Z mount lenses. Now these are fantastic lenses optically, but aren't the best for filming, as most of them lack hard stops on the focus ring, and there's currently a very limited selection of lenses. Nikon do offer an FTZ adapter, which takes a Nikon F mount to a Nikon Z mount, and that means you can use any Nikon F mount ever made, and that lens will work on your camera with metering and everything enabled. But what I'm really hoping for and what I think will happen is that manufacturers like Metabones and even the Chinese manufacturers like Viltrox, they're going to make Nikon Z mount to EOS mount adapters, so fully electronic adapters. I don't see any reason why that couldn't be possible. And even fully manual adapters like a Nikon Z mount to a PL lens adapter. And these adapters would allow the camera to be taken really seriously in the filmmaking community and would make a kind of the shift to Nikon much financially for a lot of filmmakers. Now normally cameras like the Z6 and Z7, they shoot in Nikon N-Log, and it's not something I personally have much experience with, but looking around online, a lot of people they haven't been too kind of keen on it as a log. Lots of people saying that the skin tones and the general kind of color isn't particularly nice. But Atomos did say that they've been experimenting with shooting in a linear kind of processing format. And basically all that means is that you bypass having to have any sort of log profile because you're getting all the data you possibly can by taking the raw data completely from the sensor, not touching it, and then delivering it to the Atomos, which will in turn process it as a Rec 2020, which is a HDR, full massive dynamic range color profiled film clip. And the biggest reason why I think Nikon is going to become this massive kind of filmmaking champion is because Nikon have been fairly irrelevant up until this point. And Nikon have no line in professional cameras, unlike manufacturers like Canon, Panasonic, Sony. They've all made professional cameras, and they also make semi-professional mirrorless cameras. These companies are not going to want to enable RAW over HDMI on their mirrorless camera bodies because it's most likely going to end up damaging the sales of their low-end professional cameras. And I know that may sound a bit ridiculous, but I think for kind of lots of filmmakers, especially like myself, who like using smaller cameras, if I had a choice between a Panasonic GH5S with a RAW output or a Panasonic EVA 1, I'm personally going to go for the Panasonic GH5S nearly all the time because that's the sort of setup I like using. And if they were to do that, and a lot of filmmakers weren't buying the professional cameras, they're just endangering a whole division of their company, and they're never going to want to do that. The only big problem that I could kind of see arising with Nikon is that they are almost definitely using Sony sensors. So Sony aren't going to want to have Nikon competing with their mirrorless cameras, and let alone their professional cameras, by offering this RAW output. What potentially could happen is that Sony may want to stop from selling them sensors, which I think is something that neither company wants, or more likely, they're going to write a clause into their sales contract, so Nikon won't be able to do RAW output, or if they can do RAW output, it can only be 10-bit or limited frame rates. They're going to want to have a certain way to compromise what the camera's outputting. So that's all speculation, and potentially it could be rubbish or it won't happen, but if Sony don't intervene, that means that Nikon could start developing their own kind of video kind of orientated mirrorless cameras, or their own video cameras based upon the Nikon Z mount, which are both things that I'd personally be very interested in using. So we'll have to wait and see what kind of actually comes out at the end of it, but I'm very excited for all the updates that are going to be coming out over the next couple of months, and I'm probably going to do an update video to this one. I know that the specs have been a bit limited on this one, and it's a bit more speculation. Anyway, thanks for watching that. I know it was a bit of a long one, and I'll see you guys in the next one.